everyone, I'm Corrie.
And I'm Charlotte.
And we are Literary Ramblings. This week, this month, we're discussing House of Ash by Hope Cook. Each month, we take turns picking a book to read, and this was my pick for this month. So I'm going to give a quick summary real quick, and then we can get into the discussion. All right, so House of Ash by Hope Cook is a young adult novel that follows Mila, a Victorian-era teenager who moves with her mother and sister across the ocean to live with her new stepfather, Andrew Demas. It also follows Curtis, a present-day teenager trying to care for his schizophrenic father while also keeping his life together enough that his younger sister won't be taken away from him by CPS. Mila moves into the mansion Gravenhurst and immediately has major misgivings about the house itself, as well as her new stepfather, Andrew. When her mother suddenly vanishes, Mila must face Andrew's true intentions and take drastic measures, as Gravenhurst seems to have a mind of its own. Meanwhile, when Curtis starts hearing voices, he thinks he's going down the same road as his father, but when he sees Mila in an old mirror and starts learning more about Gravenhurst, he realizes there's something else going on. As both Mila and Curtis grow more and more desperate and their different time periods collide, they're left with life or death decisions that will leave them both forever changed.
Yay, what a great summary. See, last time I went a little bit more short, and then we ended up having to kind of go back and explain things. So this time, we got a nice total summary.
Thank you. I'm so good at summaries. Don't ask me to do them ever again.
All right, we have 2 months
Okay,
off.
so basic thoughts on the book. Charlotte, do you want to go first? Just like what you thought of it in general, maybe like whatever star rating you'd give it out of 5.
Yeah, so I would give this one only a 3-star rating, which if you watched our last one or listened to our last one, it was, I gave that one 3.5, so we went down. But I really still enjoyed the book. I felt like there were a lot of questions that it leaves unanswered, and I was really invested in the story and like the setting, but I didn't get all the details that I wanted from it. And sometimes it also felt like it couldn't slow down, which like is a good thing because it made me read really fast and like I really wanted to know what was happening. But I also felt like sometimes I needed a breather from the book because it was just like so intense and like never really paused for breath.
Yeah. No, I agree with all of that. I'm pretty sure I gave it a 3 as well. My method of rating things is basically everything starts at a 3, and if you wow me, you get more stars, and if you don't do anything crazy, then you stay at 3 stars. So it can either go up or down, but I basically stay at 3. And I'm pretty sure I gave this 3 stars as well because it's good. I thought it was a good, fast read. I liked the characters. But there are a lot of unanswered questions, and there's a lot of concepts introduced that seem really cool and really interesting, but then they're not explored super well. Yeah. It also kind of exists in this middle limbo between young adult literature and children's literature, which is weird because it's written at a level, if you just looked at the words and the sentence structure and even just like the basics, it reads a lot like kids fiction. Mm-hmm. But then if you look at the content and like there's a lot of language in it, then it sort of pushes it up to young adult, but then it still reads like kids fiction. So It's kind of like a weird in between. I did like it just fine overall. Like I said, I gave it a 3-star rating, so it didn't wow me, but I didn't hate it either.
Yeah,
so I guess that's where we are.
Yeah, I don't think either of us were like, oh, I'm unhappy that I read this, or, I just don't even want to finish it, so.
Yeah, so I feel like it was fine. I definitely don't regret reading it. It's just not something that I would necessarily recommend, or even, I think I mentioned it in my Amazon review. I always do Amazon reviews for every book that I read. So I usually try to get some thoughts out there, but I mentioned that I don't know who I would recommend this book to because it's written like kids fiction. So I wouldn't necessarily push it for young adults or even adults or even like late teens. Yeah. But then the content is that I wouldn't want to recommend it to children either. So it's just a difficult kind of book to decide who should be reading it.
Yeah. So yeah. when I read the beginning, I was surprised at how kind of simplistic it was and how it felt, very, like you said, very like kids fiction, and the characters felt a little wooden, and I was kind of like, I don't even know if I'm going to get into this. And it did improve as she went along, I think. The writing, I don't know if the writing got better, maybe I just got more used to it, but when we first started it, I was like, oh, I really am not into this.
Yeah, no, I very much relate to that. All right, so those are our basic thoughts on it. We don't spend a lot of time on that because we want to kind of get into more talking. This is going to have a lot more spoilers in it because there were a lot of things that we want to talk about with the ending. So, and you have to obviously know what leads up to that in order to have it. So this one's going to be a lot more spoiler heavy. So this is your official spoiler warning. We're not really going to hold back on plot and characters and events that happen in the book. So if you are interested in reading this book and you don't want spoilers, click away now. Because this is the only warning you get. All right. I guess we could start with the characters. Just so then we have we can just kind of lay it out and have an idea of how many characters are in this book. This book has so few characters compared to the Golem and the Genie.
Oh, yeah.
It's wild. I mean, this also takes place on a much smaller scale because we're really just following Mila and her small family in the 1800s. What? They give you a year in the book. Let me flip through. 1894. So it's Mila and her small family in 1894, and then it is Curtis and his small family and his friend. And that's it. You don't really have a lot of people outside of their families to really contend with.
The demons.
Yeah. But I mean, I kind of included him in the family since her mom married him. So, I mean. And we don't really talk to any other Demuses besides Andrew. But basically, you have Mila and her little sister Wynn, and Mila and Wynn's mom. I can't remember her name now.
It's not important.
Okay, so their mom, and then their stepdad, Andrew Demus, and then Gravenhurst, the house that Mila goes to, is very much set up to be its own character, but I'm not sure that is really accomplished in this novel.
You can tell they were going for it, but I don't think it was, it never really came to fruition.
Yeah, she really tried. You even have a physical representation of the house because there's a manservant named Asher, and he is the one who is. He's not a real person. He's the house, but he's the one who is the house's personality, I guess. But he walks around and he looks like a real person. That makes sense. Sure. But then, so that's Mila. So that's essentially all the characters that you deal with for Mila. There's a couple side characters. I guess there's Zara or Zara. We never figured out how to pronounce her name. So that trend continues in this podcast. Not knowing how to pronounce anything. She's important, but she doesn't last very long in the book.
Yeah.
She kind of leaves. But yeah, so those are the characters with Mila and Gravenhurst in the past. And then in the future, it's Curtis, Curtis's little sister Sage, Curtis's dad, and then Curtis's best friend Avi.
Yeah, and then a couple of
characters
his uncle from the town.
Yeah,
and his Uncle Frank.
Yeah, his Uncle Frank in present day reminds me of Zara in past because they're kind of important, but only for 5 minutes.
Yeah. Yeah,
they don't do a lot else.
They do the thing that they're there to do, and then they, leave.
Peace out.
Oh, and the neighbor lady. I guess she's kind of important.
Yeah, she doesn't have to exist.
Okay. It gives them somewhere to go that's not their house.
That's true, but they could have literally just, walked into the woods and had someplace to go that's not their house.
True. That's what Curtis... That's what caused all this problem.
Yeah, so that's... Okay, so... I don't even know where to begin, because we really wanted to talk about the ending. So those are the characters. So I guess let's move on to, discuss the plot a little bit, because there really isn't a lot of plot until, the last, 20% of the book.
Because the first part of the book, so you're flipping back and forth between Mila and Curtis's perspectives. Not quite every other chapter, but pretty frequently.
Yeah.
And I wasn't sure how I felt about that choice because I feel like it kind of spoiled some things, which I mean is the nature of like going back in the past. You're like, oh, well, then I already know this happens.
Yeah, and also it sort of was difficult because every time we'd be like, oh, what's going to happen to Mila? Or like, what's going to happen to Chris? And I'm like, well, we know Mila dies.
Yeah.
Because the house burns down. We find that out like really early on.
Yeah.
And there's no survivors. So we were like, oh, she dies.
Yep. So it kind of took some of the tension away to do that particular method. And then I was always more invested in Curtis's parts, to be honest.
Yeah, I definitely was also. I think that part of it is that past, and I was already preparing. Like, as soon as Curtis finds out that Gravenhurst burned down in 1896.
Which is quite early.
When 1894. Yeah. And there were no survivors. I was like, okay, so nothing that happens in 1894 really matters. And I didn't want to think that. That's just like instantly my brain was just like, oh, okay, so none of this is necessarily going to affect him in real life.
Yeah.
I really didn't feel like they were connected very well.
No.
At all. I didn't understand why it mattered that we were following Mila and Curtis. Because, yeah, Curtis's times were a lot more vivid and a lot more real to me. Mm-hmm. They felt, and I don't know if it's just because he was more relatable as a character and because it happened in more present day.
Yeah.
Or if it's just because Mila was a little boring. I don't know. Or if it's just because I didn't feel invested in Mila as much.
Well, Mila she didn't really make that many choices that impact anything in a meaningful way. Mm-hmm. Because even the things that she figures out how to do in the house, she doesn't really figure out. There's, like, others that are helping her.
Yeah, which is a concept that's really unclear and not well developed. Because there's all these cool things about the house. Like, Mila, it's a house that is sort of, like, trapped in time. Mm-hmm. Which I thought would be really cool because I was like, oh, maybe Curtis is going to go back. Like, he's going to go into Gravenhurst or, like, the space where Gravenhurst was. Mm-hmm. And he's going to accidentally, like, run into Mila. And he's going to be in the past and she's going to be in the past. And it's going to be weird. Like, I thought that would be something that would happen. But that never happens. But Gravenhurst is sort of just this stuck. There's ghosts living in it that are stuck on a time loop. Mm-hmm. And Mila encounters them occasionally. And sometimes they can help her, and sometimes they don't do anything.
Yep. And it's never clear why, or, like, there's no pattern to it that you can figure out. It's not like Mila does anything to, like, well, she calls for her sister, but that doesn't always work. Oh, yeah. I guess I'm leading to a spoiler there.
Sometimes Wynn shows up and sometimes she doesn't. She never calls for her mom. Her mom never helps her or does anything.
Oh, that's a good point. I didn't even think of that.
And it was like, I thought that maybe when she was starting to react to Wynn and Wynn was helping her as a ghost, that maybe her mom would try to, like, redeem herself. But nothing ever happened with that.
So basically, really early on, this is your big spoiler, their mom marries Andrew Demas, the guy who owns Gravenhurst, and then, like, 3 days later, she disappears. And then a couple days after that, which Mila is, like, immediately suspicious and is like, we need to get out of this house, and she's, like, planning to run away with her sister. It turns out that Andrew has, like, well, the house is alive, like we said, and it's kind of stuck in time. So Asher can, like, hear pretty much anything anywhere in the house that's implied. So he obviously knew what she was planning and catches them, and then they take her little sister as well. And there's this hallway that's full of paintings, right, basically?
Yeah, I wasn't actually clear on whether she saw these particular paintings in the hallway or if she had gone into another room. The layout of the house changes as well, and sometimes it changes suddenly and sometimes it changes not so subtly.
Yeah, sometimes it just, like, shifts, kind of, it seems like.
Yeah,
and
sometimes the layout doesn't change, but time changes, and it's bizarre, and there's not really a rhyme or reason to it that I could ever figure out.
Yeah.
But anyway, she goes and she sees these paintings after her mom and sister.
She realizes that they're showing up in these paintings. Mm-hmm. And then later you find out that the house has to feed to stay alive. And Andrew's been sacrificing women specifically, to the house. And
there's no men in the house besides Andrew Demas and like Asher. But Asher is the house, so I don't know if I would really count
No,
him.
there were manservants, I thought, but they never come up again.
No, they're like never mentioned again. Yeah, there's no women, and that's something that Mila notices right when they like drive up the first time, and you're just like, would you really like notice that? I mean, I guess maybe, but it was never explained why it was always the women being sacrificed to the house. It's never really brought up again. It's just like, oh, he just sacrifices all the women, and it's like, but why though? I don't understand.
Yeah, what's the difference
why
between
that's a thing?
Sacrificing a servant woman and sacrificing a stable one? Like, I don't know.
Yeah, so I didn't get that. That's a concept that wasn't really like put together. So basically, the whole story, you're just kind of going back and forth between Mila and Curtis, and then things sort of start heating up because Curtis's dad gets worse, and he gets more violent, and their uncle, Curtis's uncle, wants to take custody of Curtis and Sage. But of course, Curtis doesn't want that to happen. He's going to turn 18 very soon. And so he wants, as soon as he turns 18, to get custody of Sage so that they can stay together. So that starts heating up. And Mila, in the past, stuff kind of starts happening. She just gets more and more suspicious of Andrew. I don't know that she really like pushes the plot along that much. She figures out that like the heart of the house is in like a deep cellar. And it's weird because the more she finds out about the house, the more it's unclear as to how the house works. Because she implies that there's like some science behind it. Like there is a physical like room in the basement that is like, that's the heart of the house that has like actual like a control panel and stuff in it. But then at the same time, 90% of it is just like, she finds all this like occult stuff and like ritualistic things and like sacrificing and like blood, and it's like, okay, so is it science or is it magic? And then they're just kind of like, yes.
Yeah, they never really answer for how the house works or what all it can even do. Like it's unclear.
Yeah, because sometimes Mila seems to outsmart the house, and I'm like, I don't know how you can outsmart the house and like have it not know where you are. Or what you're doing. It's literally the house. It's around you all the time.
Yeah, like they talk about it being able to hear, but I'm like, can it not see or feel? But then they imply it can feel because she stabs the walls at one point and it like bleeds.
Yeah, and it bleeds.
So I'm like, wouldn't it be able to just tell where she is by like feeling her walking around? I don't know.
Yeah. So I don't know. It was very unclear how that worked, but that's the plot for Mila for a lot of the book is that she's just kind of like wandering around the house. She doesn't have anything left to lose because Andrew's taken away all of her family. She doesn't have anyone else, and he wants to marry her. That's like the sinister thing, and she's going to turn 18 soon as well. So she and Curtis are sort of in a similar-ish position, I guess.
Yeah,
at least with their ages.
Their 18th birthday is approaching. Although for Curtis it means freedom, and for Mila it means getting married to a guy that she hates. So
yes. Yeah, so, I mean, it is what it is. But that's essentially the plot until, like, the last 20%. Curtis is slowly losing control of reality. He feels like he's going insane. In the very beginning, he stumbles across the plot where Gravenhurst was because it burned down. And so there's nothing there. It's just an empty field. But he's just, like, riding his dirt bike.
Isn't it inside a bunch of trees?
No. Because he stands, I remember thinking that because he like looks at the cops, but he's actually standing on Gravenhurst.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
Well, see, I didn't even visualize.
I remember making a mental note of that, like at the end when they return to this spot.
They keep saying the
because
cops.
It's like, oh, yeah, because that's what he thinks it is, but then he's actually just standing on it.
Ah, okay.
At least that's the way I understood it. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. I'm not gonna go back and try to find it.
Nope, it's fine.
But anyway, so he rides his dirt bike and he comes across the plot that Gravenhurst was on, whether it was a copse of trees or not. And then he starts hearing voices, which makes him really nervous because his dad's schizophrenic and he thinks that he might be going crazy too, which schizophrenic people are not crazy. I'm just going to put that out there. We're going to talk about that in a bit. But Curtis thinks that maybe he is going down the same road as his father. And so that's kind of starts amping up throughout the book is that he has more and more problems as his home life starts to deteriorate and his dad's health is deteriorating, and his sister's trust in him is also deteriorating.
Yep.
I don't know how many times I can say that word without stumbling over it. He feels more and more attached to Mila, who he sees. Oh my gosh, this is so. I feel like I'm being really confusing because I keep getting to a point and then realizing that I forgot to mention something, and I forgot to mention that there's a mirror in the house.
Yeah. Well, but you find
That's
out
important.
I think you find out about it first in Curtis's timeline, though. Like, he finds the mirror in his mom's bedroom, and his mom's dead, and that's when he sees Mila in the mirror.
Yeah.
That's what initially connects them.
Yeah, and then he obsesses over her.
Although, I guess in Mila's timeline, Zara stole a mirror from the house and ran away with it.
Yeah.
And you know that. And she's, like, the only woman who escapes the house, I guess.
Yeah, so she takes the mirror, and the mirror is apparently really important to the house and to Andrew's control of the house, which is just another thing that's not really explained, like how much control or why he needs control over the house and why the mirror is what's attached to the house, and it's just a lot. But Zara steals it, and she gets away with it, and then it ends up in Curtis's house. And Curtis sees Mila in it, and then he's obsessed with Mila, and he keeps hearing voices, and everybody around him thinks that he's going crazy. Where was I going with this? Because I remembered the mirror at the last second.
He was at the site of Gravenhurst.
Yeah, he starts there. We start with Curtis there, and then he starts hearing voices, and so all this time he's trying to find more information about Gravenhurst, and that's sort of his plot up until the last 20% of the book, where he feels like he's slowly going crazy, and he's trying to find out more information about Gravenhurst, and he really doesn't find that much information about it.
No.
And people that he asks about it just act like he's being stupid and that he doesn't need to know anything about Gravenhurst, that it's all just dumb. Yeah. So they don't give him any information.
Yeah, and then of course that makes him feel paranoid because he's like, they're hiding things. And then his best friend Avi is like, no, they're not hiding things. Like, there's just not records of it. And
you're scary.
Yeah, exactly.
You're going crazy. You're not sleeping.
Yep.
You're not taking care of yourself. It's kind of rough.
Yeah. So
that's what Curtis is doing, and Mila is just sort of learning more about the house without really learning anything about the house. And then we get to the last 20-ish% of the book, where suddenly everything happens and nothing makes sense.
So it starts with basically Curtis's dad getting into a fight with Frank, and the police end up being called, and then they take Curtis's dad away, which obviously really upsets Curtis, but there's really nothing he can do about it. And so, and then his reaction, which is a good realistic teenage reaction, is to just find a party and like go there and get super drunk.
Yeah.
So, and then he almost hooks up with this girl, and then in the middle of it, which I thought was very odd, but whatever, she's like, "Oh, I heard about your dad. Like, I'm sorry. How are you doing?" And then he
like in the middle of it, and you're just like, "What? Why?"
Yeah.
I don't know. She was just trying to like get the next gossip scoop, and was like, "Oh, here's my opportunity," or what? But yeah. So and then he leaves her, and he gets so drunk he passes out, and Avi brings him home.
Yeah.
And then they have a fight with his sister in the morning.
Because his sister's like, "You forgot about me. You didn't tell me what was going on. Like, I found out from my friends what happened to our dad."
Yeah, which is absolutely realistic. I mean, he really does leave Sage behind a lot. He tries really hard to care, but then he has so much other stuff that he has to care about that, you know, he only has so much mental power to like keep track of everything, and he's the only one who can like force some control over his dad.
Yeah, his dad kind of listens to him and not Sage. So
yeah, not fully, but at least somewhat.
Yeah.
What happens directly after that? Because doesn't he leaves again because he goes back to the university, right?
Yeah, where
because there was this one lady he was convinced that he's convinced that she has more information. So he goes back to the university and breaks into her office. Right? Is that when that happens?
Which smart move Curtis, like, your dad's already been basically arrested by the cops.
Yeah.
And you're breaking and entering.
Yeah. So he goes, and then the university professor shows up, and she talks to him about Gravenhurst, and I can't even remember what she says.
She lies.
But,
well,
yeah, she's got to lie to him,
not.
right? She didn't, like, tell him the truth.
Yeah.
And then Curtis leaves there and goes back to his house, right? He has a fight with Avi.
Oh, right. He has a big falling out with Avi.
Yeah.
Avi calls him crazy, kind of.
He tells Avi that he's hearing voices, and then he's convinced it's Gravenhurst, and Avi's like, well, we'll get you help. And then Curtis is like, no!
Yeah.
And then
he, like, locks Avi out of the car or something and just drives away.
Yeah, and drives away. So that's nice of him. Yeah. And then, is that when Curtis goes home and their dad is attacking Sage?
Yes, I think so.
Okay. So he goes home.
Is his dad home again?
He comes back because Curtis comes to the house at some point and he hears the altercation going on. And he goes up and his dad is, like, strangling Sage.
Yeah.
It's very dark.
Like, pull them apart.
The domestic violence in this book is too real for me.
Yeah.
It's really rough to read at times. Mm-hmm. But anyway, so he goes home and he sees that happening and he goes berserk on his dad, obviously. Like, he saves his sister and he takes his sister over to the neighbor's house, which has been a safe haven for both of them. Well, more his sister than him. And then he drops her off there. And then does he go directly to Gravenhurst?
I think so.
And he finds the cellar because the house burned down, so there's nothing there. But he finds the door to the cellar and he goes down in there and he sees Asher, who is basically just falling apart, like literally, because the house has not been fed in 200 years.
Yeah, which a reminder, Asher's the human form of the house.
Yeah.
So I guess he'd be the house's eyes.
Yeah, something like that. But anyway, so he sees Asher. Asher literally falls apart, and then Curtis leaves the cellar, and he's like, "This is it. Like, I'm gone. Yeah. I'm too far gone." He's like having a really, really difficult time. He's having a mental breakdown.
Yeah. He feels like he failed his sister because she got hurt. He pushed away his best friend. His dad is like off the rails and like is probably about to be institutionalized. His uncle came at one point and said that he was like going to a lawyer and going to force the custody issue. So Curtis is like out of time on everything. Yeah.
So he has a knife on him, which I cannot remember when he got the knife or anything.
I don't think it's mentioned. He probably just carries it. I guess.
He just has it. So, he is about to slit his own throat when suddenly, Mila appears. She just walks out of the cellar.
Yep.
That's it.
And was he holding a photo of her? I forget.
I think so.
And I think he says he wishes she was real because he feels like also that he is going crazy. And he's like, but obviously this isn't real. We know
better, sort of. We'll get to that. But yeah, so then Milo shows up and he's like, oh, okay, maybe we'll figure this out. And then, okay, here we go. Here we go with the ending of this book.
Yeah,
because this was so bizarre and so weird, and I have no idea how this was possibly like set up or makes sense even a little bit. Earlier in the book, when Curtis is trying to figure out what Gravenhurst is and like, trying to just get more information about it, he finds out that the Demas family who own Gravenhurst, they paid for like a lot of the town. They poured a lot of money into the town. Like they built the hospital and they put money into emergency services and they like built the library, all this stuff. So there's a lot of money. There's a lot of Demas money in the town. But the Demases haven't been around since the fire in 1894. Yeah. So it's been over 200 years. Okay, so we're in the field. Mila and Curtis are there, and freaking all of a sudden, the university professor shows up. She just like waltzes out there with a gun. And she's just like, hey, Curtis, guess what? You're a Demas, and I'm going to murder you.
Yep.
Because we have to end the Demas line because the town is dying, because Gravenhurst is just sucking it dry, and there's a cost for blood magic.
Yeah.
And are you confused yet? Because I was really confused.
Yep. And
I was like, where did this come from?
And she's not there alone. She brought her husband along, who has never been introduced to this point. He's just there. And Curtis's uncle Frank is there as well, and apparently in on it.
Yep. And they're just like, we got to get rid of Gravenhurst forever. And I'm just like, what are you talking about?
Which
apparently
it has been established that the town is kind of falling apart. It's mentioned quite frequently. Too frequently, really, in my opinion.
But then they just show up and they're just like, yeah, we have to end the Demas line. So the real plot twist is because there were no survivors in that fire 200 years ago. But Zara was Andrew Demas's daughter.
Yep.
And that's literally never explained. That's all the information you get.
There's one line where Zara says, you know who my mother was, or something like that, to Andrew. But that's the only hint that there ever is that there's any kind of connection between them. Other than that, she's just like some servant girl who is working for Mila and her family.
Yeah. And that's it. And you're just like, what?
Yep.
Because that never gets anything more. And so Curtis's mom was a Demas.
Mm-hmm.
So now Curtis is a Demas. And so now, because he's a male Demas, he's supposed to take control of the house. So the house was like calling out to him.
Yeah, so he wasn't hearing voices.
The university professor. Yeah, and the university professor and her husband and Uncle Frank don't want that to happen because
we don't know. They have no good motivation behind it.
Yeah, they're just like
they could have
the town is cursed.
Yeah, they could have
explained, and so we gotta put an end to the curse.
What was happening, and then Curtis could have done something about it hypothetically because he has control of the house. But instead, they're just like, we're just going to murder Curtis and take it over ourselves. I don't know if that's because they want to reinstate the human sacrifices to the house or what.
Yeah, I don't know. It's really unclear. But there's a whole big, fight, like a physical fight between all of them. And Mila helps Curtis. Curtis helps Mila because they're the only two there who are the good guys.
Yeah.
And a whole bunch of stuff happens. I think it's implied that the only bad guy who dies is the university professor. I think she's the only one.
Or her husband. He definitely dies.
Does he die?
Yeah, I actually reread that scene. Curtis hits him in the jaw with a wrench, and his jaw breaks. And then he tells Mila, because they're in a hiding spot, and he, ambushes him. Yeah. And he tells Mila, he's like, oh, he's already down. And then he hears, a thump. And so I think it's implied that Mila hit him again in the head.
But I remember that, but I thought it was also implied that he was taken to the hospital.
I don't know, because when the professor asks where's my husband, Mila says I shot him. But
maybe. Hang on, I'm flipping through this. I'm never gonna find it. I can't find anything in this book. I don't know why. Yeah, but Avi shows up and kind of creates a massive distraction.
Yeah, with Curtis's dirt bike, because he didn't have his vehicle anymore.
So they win. The house takes the professor.
Yes.
Because Curtis tells it to.
Mm-hmm.
There's a moment. And Curtis is take her. And so the house does. And then they leave, and that's the end. There's nothing more. There's literally, I just,
nope.
That's it. There's no explanations. There's no, anything else. It's just, they just leave.
Yeah, they don't do anything else to the house. I mean,
nope.
It's just still in the same state it was. I mean, I guess Asher did die, but the house still took the professor, so it's implied that it's still somewhat alive.
Yeah.
And there's also a moment where Curtis, can tell that he could take more control of the house, kind of an evil urge, and he pushes it away. But it's I don't know that that's ever going to go away then, if the house is still there.
Yeah, and now it's been fed, so now it should last even longer.
Yeah, they didn't, solve the problem. They just got rid of the couple of people from town who were a personal problem to Curtis.
Yeah.
And then they're like, hey, Mila, you can live in our century now. Which is cool.
Yeah. It's just... There's just no satisfaction in the end.
No. And also, like, I was really confused when the dirt bike just broke into the room. And I think it's implied that Avi must have just, like, I don't know, tied something to the throttle and, like, let it run in or something.
Yeah, that was also really unclear because I thought they went around a lot of corners.
Yeah,
so
and I was
the bike
like,
would have gotten there.
Yeah, I was like, is this bike like possessed or what is happening?
Yeah.
Also, the horses went crazy in the past, and they never come back to that either. I'm like, can the house possess things? Is that literally part of it or not? That's why I was like, is this dirt bike possessed? And it's like coming to save Curtis because he's the master of the house, or is it just, I don't know. Yeah, Avi. But all the horses who used to live at Gravenhurst all went crazy and died in the past, and that's never explained either.
Darren Vandenberg was brought out on a stretcher, Frank in handcuffs.
Oh, okay. Well, maybe he was alive.
A helicopter came for the 2 suspects. But I think that's it. It's on 291. I think that's the last time he's mentioned, though. So I don't know. Maybe he died in transit.
That's nice of the author to not have her main characters be murderers in the very end.
Well, Curtis is still a murderer. He still told the house to take her.
Oh.
To take the professor.
You're right. Well, I don't know. Did he know what was going to happen?
I think he knew what was going to happen.
You think so?
I don't think he knew, like, exactly what was going to happen. But when you tell an evil, possessed house to take someone, I feel like you know they're not coming back.
Yeah, all right. Because he did put the connection together that when he put the knife to his throat and wished for Mila, he cut himself a tiny bit. And I guess that even that little amount of blood was enough for the house to, like, do it.
Yeah, I really wanted in the end for them to figure out something to do with the house, but like you said, they don't do anything.
Nope.
With it. Curtis doesn't. I wanted Curtis to take control of it and like find a way to like do something else. I wanted the ending to be like just, I don't know, like an epilogue like 5 years later where they're like, they finally have enough money to start rebuilding Gravenhurst, and Mila's like, is this a good idea? And Curtis is like, well, somebody has to control it, otherwise it'll take over the whole town. You know?
Yeah, that would have been cool. Or I would have liked them to purify it, because the original Demas who built the house apparently didn't build it evil. He was just, I don't know, trying to listen to the music of the spheres, is I think what they said.
Yeah, like some kind of like universe sort of like learning all the information kind of thing.
Yeah, like a source of knowledge, and like, so I thought it would have been cool if Curtis could like purify it somehow, but
yeah,
that didn't happen either. So
nope, they just sort of walk away from it, which really, really irritated me because there's so many good concepts in House. I really like the idea that you stab it and it bleeds, and I was like, that's really weird, but also kind of interesting. I liked the idea that Wynn helps Mila with staying in certain time periods in the house because there's so many different time loops that you can get into them, and you can affect things in present day. Because like when Mila finds the cellar, she follows another Demas down into the cellar who's in control of the house, and she has to like take the key. Otherwise, she knows that when she goes back to her own time, she'll be trapped in the cellar.
Yes. Yeah. So it was cool. It was kind of like she could pass things back and forth through time.
Yeah, and that's what I was really, really looking for that between her and Curtis. Like, for them to figure out how to pass things or information, like, back and forth. But they see each other in the mirror a few times, and every single time they do, I'm like, why don't you do anything with this? Yeah. Like, Mila is always like, no, I gotta take care of everything myself, and Curtis is like, let me help you. But then that's it. That's, like, every single interaction between them in the mirror. Besides, like, the first one when they were like, I don't know what's going on. Why am I seeing this person in a mirror?
Yeah. Yeah, they never have an actual conversation other than Mila being like, this house is evil and needs to be destroyed. And then they don't even do that.
Yeah. I don't know. There was a lot more potential in this book that it didn't live up to.
I mean, is that what drew you to this book? I was going to ask you that, like, why you ended up picking this book.
Because I found it really cheap. And it looked kind of interesting. I think I paid $3 for each copy of it.
Just so everyone knows, we mostly buy used books.
Yeah.
The only books we've read in the past that got kind of expensive were the Red Rising trilogy, and that was totally worth it. So
Absolutely. And it's going to be worth it when he finally releases the third book, but that's another story. But what we do is each month when we do the pick, whoever's pick it is will buy the other person's copy as well.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times Charlotte buys a lot of used books, so she tends to have to hunt down a copy for me. Yeah. Whereas if I pick something, I tend to pick when I buy a book that it's going to be a club pick. So I tend to just buy two at a time. And then we ship them across the United States of America.
And Corrie does work at a bookstore, so she can get books cheaper.
Yeah, pretty cheap. But, okay, so there was another thing that we want to talk about with this book. Besides the ending being weird and it not really living up to potential, there's a lot of mental illness mentioned in this book. Mm-hmm. And I could not decide if it was mentioned in a respectful way or not.
Yeah.
The author, I read the little blurb. There's always a little blurb on the book cover. It says, like, oh, this is who the author is. And in it, it says that she draws from her personal experience with mental illness and family violence, mm-hmm. which sort of, that made a lot of those scenes a lot more weighty. Yeah. But then at the same time, I was like, I don't know. I really hated that we didn't know for sure whether Curtis was actually having mental problems or if we were supposed to believe him, because he's hearing voices and stuff, and we're like, well, we kind of know that Gravenhurst does exist and it speaks through time, mm-hmm. so it's probably just Gravenhurst, but of course nobody else believes him about that.
The other piece of it is that no one hears the house talking in Mila's time that we know of, because we never get Andrew Demas's perspective.
Yeah.
And he always talks to Asher anyway. So there was no element of it, other than, I guess, Mila talking to her sister, but again, that was just to her sister.
Yeah.
Or is there a moment where Mila hears a bunch of voices?
Yeah, there are a couple. That's a good point. I actually hadn't thought about that. But yeah, he just thinks that he's going to become schizophrenic like his dad, so he like hides it and stuff. Mm-hmm. And I don't know, it always kind of bothers me, the whole trope that the crazy person is really not crazy, that mm-hmm. they don't have a mental illness, they're really hearing ghosts, and it's just like, I don't know, it's just such a difficult like line to walk, I guess, in my opinion.
Yeah, because you're implying that like it could be possible to just, he's just hearing ghosts.
Yeah, like that it could just be
he was right.
It's a dangerous like kind of thing, because it's like you're almost just telling people like, oh, the fantasies are right. Mm-hmm. And it's just like, no, that's not.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's hard to even like discuss, I feel like sometimes, because it's just a hard spot to put yourself in. Mm-hmm. I just don't like it as a trope. And I feel like this book in particular did not use it in a super disrespectful manner.
Yeah.
But they did play into it a decent amount. And I get that that's part of, one of the biggest parts of Curtis's story arc is that he is dealing with this, and it is a real life thing that a lot of people do end up having to deal with. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, I don't know. It didn't always sit right with me, the way that mental illness was used.
It did feed into the idea that schizophrenics are dangerous.
Yeah.
Because his dad was very violent.
Yes.
And not just to himself, but because he also, there's this repeating scene where his dad puts a rifle to his own head, and Curtis kind of has to talk him down.
Yeah, like every day.
Yeah.
He is more than just schizophrenic.
Oh yeah, he has an official diagnosis.
Yeah, Avi says it right in the beginning, and I marked it because Avi says to Curtis, he says, no one expects you to be some sort of expert in bipolar schizoaffective with manic episodes or whatever it is. So that's the only time we ever get an actual thing. I just use the term schizophrenic throughout, but maybe that's not actually totally accurate. Because I'm not familiar enough with bipolar schizoaffective.
Yeah.
But it's the manic episodes part that is the dangerous part that Curtis has to deal with, where his dad goes off the rails really bad. I don't know. I feel after I read the author's note where it said that this draws from her personal experiences, it did make me feel like it made sense that she was a little more respectful with it than a lot of authors can be.
There was still the implication, though, that going to the hospital was a bad thing for Curtis's dad.
Yes. But she did also toe the line because she did mention medications and how it was always this, not necessarily a guessing game, but Curtis dreaded whenever they would change his medications because it was always basically trial and error.
Yeah, which is true.
Which I thought was and I thought that was a good point to make in there too. And of all the books that I've read with this trope in it, I feel like this one probably is the most respectful. I don't love it, but at the same time, the more we're discussing like how it's used, the more I feel like, it's not the worst way that you can use the mental illness trope.
There was a reason for it to be in the book.
Yes, and Curtis has mixed feelings about his dad.
Yeah.
Like he knows, he understands that his dad, is mentally ill, that he doesn't necessarily know everything that he's doing. But then at the same time, he does blame his dad as well. Yeah. So I liked that sort of...
That was a realistic perspective, of like a teenage perspective on that happening with your dad.
Yeah, because Curtis is just trying to make it by, and, he doesn't know what he's doing necessarily, and he's just a teenager who's trying to make it through life and take care of his dad and also his sister, but he kind of has to protect them from each other at the same time, and so he can't, protect himself. So, I don't know, overall, not bad.
Yeah.
Not a bad use of it. It just is always one of those little, red flag things that when I see it used in books, I'm just like, are you going to do this, justice? Are you going to be, okay with this? Or is it just going to be another trope?
I wasn't clear either if, when he got custody of Sage, if he just planned on, leaving his dad in that house, or, having him
that was not ever really explained. He never really says whether, what his plan actually is. He wants to make sure that Sage has a good life and that she goes off to college and does everything, and then he'd start his own life or whatever.
Yeah.
But he never really explains what happens to his dad in that scenario, whether he just gets committed or if, I don't know. He never says anything about it, so I don't even know what another option would be.
No, it just seemed like there is set up that he just didn't like his uncle, Frank. So he definitely didn't want him having custody of them.
Yeah.
Which is a valid point. But yeah, he never actually outlines his plan either.
Yeah. Yeah. Any other thoughts on it? We covered some characters. We talked about the plot and how the ending kind of sucks. There's just so many good ideas, and just none of them are brought to fruition. About mental illness in it. Is there anything positive that we want to say about this book? I like to end on a positive.
I do think the emotions portrayed were really good. They're very strong, really intense. They felt fairly realistic. Sometimes a little over the top, maybe, but I feel like when you were reading the scenes, you felt like you were really there. So.
Yeah, I would actually definitely agree with that. Curtis's parts were really vivid, and sometimes that was just because they are a lot darker than I would say Mila's parts are. Mila's dealing with the idea of marrying somebody that she hates in the 1800s.
Yeah.
Whereas Curtis is I don't know. It feels like Curtis's life has more weight to it. Yeah. And there's more on his shoulders.
But again, we probably relate more to him because he's in our time period. So.
Yeah, that's also true.
I really liked, I don't know if we're cursing on this podcast or not, but I really liked that he had a demon. That's how he characterizes it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I was like, I do like that because he would that's how he would think of it when he would do something really reckless, basically. And I was like,
yeah,
I do like this.
It was a nice touch, honestly. I didn't hate that.
Yeah.
I thought it was kind of funny.
And
because that's such a teen thing to do, to have. Because once you become an adult, it's okay, you need to calm down.
Yeah. And Avi was a good supporting character as well. We didn't talk much about him, but he did a good job of he didn't feel like an exposition device or anything. He just felt like he really cared about Curtis, and was trying to support him. He had some funny lines. Like, I liked him.
Yeah, me too. I definitely really liked Avi. I thought that especially their moments they felt really real. I feel like the conversations between characters, they just felt, I don't know, they felt really real. I don't know another word like put it. They flowed exactly the way I would feel like a conversation would flow. I guess more so between Curtis and Sage and then Curtis and Avi.
Yeah.
Just because they always felt like very like real people. I felt like I was eavesdropping into like a real life conversation, no matter how like serious it got or whatever.
Yeah.
So I thought that was really good. I think she builds characters. I think the author builds characters pretty well and makes them really vivid to the reader. I think there's a lot of really good moments in this book. It's just hard to know where to recommend it.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
All right. Well, that was Charlotte and I talking about House of Ash by Hope Cook. Thank you so much for listening. Make sure to leave a like if you liked this podcast video hybrid thing that we do, because we don't know how to do podcasts. And let us know what you thought in the comments down below. Or, don't do that. I don't care. I'm not your mom. Bye.
Bye.